The sun rose slowly over the small African village of Oa Alero, its warm rays gradually illuminating the thatched roofs of mud huts and the dusty paths that wound between them. On this particular morning, there was an air of excitement in the Onyubo household. Today was Amaka's 7th birthday, and her parents, Nnamdi and Adaeze, had been up since before dawn, preparing for the celebration. Amaka stirred in her small bed, rubbing her eyes as the sunlight streamed through the window. She could hear her mother's voice outside, probably talking to a neighbor. The smell of frying plantains wafted through the air, making her stomach growl. She jumped out of bed, her small feet hitting the cool earthen floor. "Mama." "Papa," she called out, running to the main room of their modest home. "Is it time yet?" Adaeze turned from the cooking fire, a wide smile on her face. "Ah, our birthday girl is awake. Come here, my sweet Amaka." Amaka ran into her mother's open arms, giggling as Adaeze lifted her and spun her around. Nnamdi entered from outside, his face beaming with pride. "There's my little princess," he said, ruffling Amaka's hair. "Are you ready for your special day?" Amaka nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, Papa. Can I go play with my friends now?" Adaeze laughed, setting Amaka down. "First, you must eat. Growing girls need their strength, especially on their birthdays." As Amaka sat down to a breakfast of fried plantains and eggs, she could hardly contain her excitement. Her parents had promised her a small party later, with a few of her friends from the village. It wasn't much; they couldn't afford lavish celebrations, but to Amaka, it was everything. After breakfast, Amaka helped her mother clean up, then ran outside to find her friends. The village was already bustling with activity. Women carried baskets of yams and cassava on their heads, heading to the small market at the village center. Men walked towards the fields, hoes slung over their shoulders, ready for another day of farming. "Amaka, happy birthday," a voice called out. It was Chidi, Amaka's best friend, running towards her with a big grin on his face. "Chidi," Amaka exclaimed, hugging her friend. "Thank you. Do you want to play?" Chidi nodded, and soon they were joined by a few other children from the village. They spent the morning playing their favorite games, hide and seek among the huts, racing each other down the dusty paths, and telling stories under the big baobab tree at the edge of the village. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the children's play became more boisterous. They were in the middle of a game of tag when it happened, the moment that would change Amaka's life forever. Chidi was running, trying to avoid being tagged, when he tripped over a protruding root. He fell hard, his arm scraping against a sharp rock on the ground. Blood immediately began to flow from a deep gash. "Chidi!" Amaka cried out, running to her friend's side. The other children gathered around, their faces etched with concern. Chidi was trying hard not to cry, but Amaka could see the pain in his eyes. Without thinking, she reached out and touched his arm, right where the cut was deepest. What happened next would be retold in the village for years to come. As soon as Amaka's fingers made contact with Chidi's wound, a soft, warm glow emanated from her hand. The children watched in stunned silence as the gash on Chidi's arm began to close, the blood flow stopping and the skin knitting back together before their very eyes. In a matter of seconds, it was over. Where there had been a deep, painful cut, now there was only smooth, unbroken skin. Chidi stared at his arm in disbelief, then at Amaka, whose eyes were as wide as saucers. How did you do that?" Chidi whispered. Amaka shook her head, just as bewildered as her friend. I don't know, I just wanted to help you, and then..." The other children erupted in excited chatter. "It's magic. Amaka has powers. Did you see that? The cut just disappeared." As the children's voices grew louder, adults began to take notice. A small crowd gathered around the group of children, curious about the commotion. "What's going on here?" asked Ekin, one of the village elders, his voice cutting through the excited chatter. Chidi, still in awe, held up his arm. "Amaka healed me, Elder Ekin. I fell and cut my arm badly, but she touched it, and look, it's gone." Ekin peered at Chidi's arm, then at Amaka, who was looking increasingly overwhelmed by the attention. The old man's eyes widened as he realized the implications of what he was hearing. Child, he said gently to Amaka, can you tell me what happened? Amaka, her voice small and uncertain, recounted what had occurred. As she spoke, the crowd grew larger, villagers whispering amongst themselves. Some looked at Amaka with awe, others with a hint of fear. Iking listened intently, his weathered face thoughtful. When Amaka finished her story, he nodded slowly. It seems, he said, his voice carrying to the entire gathered crowd, that the spirits have blessed our village with a very special gift. Amaka, on this day of your birth, you have been revealed as a healer. A murmur ran through the crowd. Healers were rare and highly respected in their culture. To have one so young and in their small village was unprecedented. We must inform the chief, Iking continued. And your parents, child. This is a momentous occasion for our village. As if on cue, Nnamdi and Adias pushed their way through the crowd, looks of concern on their faces. Amaka. What's happening? Are you all right? Adias called out, reaching for her daughter. Amaka ran to her parents, suddenly feeling overwhelmed by the attention. As Nnamdi lifted her into his arms, Iking approached them. Nnamdi, Adias, he said solemnly, your daughter has been blessed by the spirits. She has the gift of healing. Nindi and Adias exchanged shocked glances. They had always known their daughter was special, but this was beyond anything they could have imagined. As the news spread through the village like wildfire, Amaka clung to her father, burying her face in his shoulder. She didn't understand what was happening or why everyone was making such a fuss. All she knew was that she had helped her friend, and now everything seemed to be changing. Little did she know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge her, her family, and her entire village in ways they could never have anticipated. Chapter 2. The news spreads. In the days following Amaka's miraculous healing of Chidi, the village of Owa Aliro was abuzz with excitement. The story of the young girl with the healing touch spread rapidly, not just within the village but to neighboring communities as well. Nnamdi and Adias found themselves at the center of attention, fielding constant questions and receiving congratulations from friends and strangers alike. At first, they were proud but also overwhelmed. They had always seen Amaka as their sweet, ordinary little girl. Now, suddenly she was being hailed as a gift from the spirits. For Amaka herself, the changes were even more confusing. She didn't feel any different, and she certainly didn't feel special or blessed. If anything, she felt scared and uncertain. The way people looked at her now with awe, expectation, and sometimes even a hint of fear made her uncomfortable. One evening, about a week after the incident, Amaka sat with her parents in their small hut. The last of the day's visitors had finally left, and a tired silence hung in the air. Mama Amaka said quietly, "Why is everyone making such a big deal? I just wanted to help Chidi." Adias moved to sit beside her daughter, pulling her into a warm embrace. "Oh, my sweet child, what you did, it's not something ordinary people can do. It's a very special gift." Nnemdi nodded, his face serious. "The ability to heal with a touch is rare, Amaka. It's seen as a blessing from our ancestors. People are excited because they believe you can help many people." Amaka furrowed her brow, trying to understand. "But I don't know how I did it. What if I can't do it again?" Her parents exchanged a glance over her head. It was a question they had been grappling with themselves. "We don't know exactly how it works," Adias admitted. "But if the spirits have truly blessed you with this gift, I'm sure you'll be able to use it again when it's needed." As if to test this theory, the next day brought the first of what would become many visitors seeking Amaka's help. A woman from the far side of the village arrived, cradling her young son who had been suffering from a high fever for days. "Please," the woman begged, her eyes filled with desperate hope. "They say your daughter can heal. My son, he's so sick. Can she help him?" Nnemdi and Adias hesitated, looking at each other uncertainty. They hadn't even had a chance to discuss how to handle such requests. But before they could respond, Amaka stepped forward. "I can try," she said softly, her young face set with determination. The woman laid her son on a mat and Amaka knelt beside him. The boy's skin was hot to the touch, his breathing labored. Amaka placed her small hand on his forehead, closing her eyes in concentration. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, a soft glow began to emanate from Amaka's palm. The adults watched in amazement as the boy's labored breathing eased, and the flush began to fade from his cheeks. When Amaka opened her eyes and removed her hand, the boy's fever had broken. He blinked up at them, his eyes clear for the first time in days. The mother burst into tears of joy, gathering her son into her arms. "Thank you," she sobbed, reaching out to clasp Amaka's hand. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." As the woman left with her recovered son, word of this second healing spread quickly. By nightfall, 3 more people had arrived seeking Amaka's help: an old man with arthritis, a young woman with a persistent cough, and a child with a badly infected cut. Amaka helped them all, but each healing seemed to drain her. By the time the last visitor left, she was pale and swaying on her feet. "That's enough for today," Namdi said firmly, scooping his daughter up in his arms. "Amaka needs to rest." But even as he put her to bed, he and Adias exchanged worried glances. They were proud of their daughter's gift and her willingness to help others. But they could see the toll it was taking on her. How were they going to manage this? The next morning, Nenamdi went to see the village chief Obiora. He found the older man sitting under the large iroko tree that marked the center of the village, deep in discussion with several elders. "Ah," Nenamdi, Chief Obiora greeted him warmly. "We were just talking about your remarkable daughter. Come, sit with us." Nenamdi sat, feeling the weight of the elders' gazes upon him. "Chief Obiora," he began, "I've come to seek your advice. Amaka's gift, it's wonderful, but I fear for her. Yesterday she healed 4 people and it left her exhausted. What if more come today, and tomorrow? How do we protect her?" The chief nodded thoughtfully, stroking his gray beard. "These are wise concerns, Nenamdi. A gift like Amaka's is rare and precious. It must be nurtured and protected, not exploited." One of the elders, a woman named Nkechi, spoke up. "In the old stories, healers like Amaka were cared for by the entire community. They were given the best food, the most comfortable lodgings, and were never asked to heal beyond their strength." But times have changed, another elder, Amaka, pointed out. "Word of Amaka's gift will spread far beyond our village. People will come from all over, desperate for healing. How do we manage that?" Chief Obiora held up a hand, silencing the murmurs that had broken out among the elders. "Nenamdi," he said, his voice grave, "your daughter's gift is a blessing to our village, but it also brings great responsibility. We must find a way to use it wisely for the good of all, without harming Amaka." He thought for a moment, then continued. "For now, I think it's best if we limit the number of people Amaka heals each day. Perhaps no more than 3, and only for serious ailments. She should also have days of rest between healings." Namdi nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. "Thank you, Chief, that sounds wise. But how do we decide who she helps? And what do we do about people coming from outside the village?" The chief sighed. "These are difficult questions, Nenamdi. For now, let's say that priority should be given to members of our village and to those with the most serious needs. As for outsiders, we'll need to be cautious. We don't want to attract too much attention from the larger world." As Nenamdi left the meeting, he felt both relieved and burdened. The chief's advice was sound, but he knew implementing it would not be easy. Already, he could see a small crowd gathering near his home, people waiting hopefully for Amaka's healing touch. When he reached home, he found Adias trying to manage the crowd while Amaka hid inside, overwhelmed by the attention. "Listen, everyone," Nenamdi called out, his voice firm. "I've just spoken with Chief Obiora. Amaka's gift is precious, but it takes a toll on her. From now on, she will only heal 3 people each day, and only those with the most serious needs. She will also need days of rest between healings." There were murmurs of discontent from the crowd, but most seemed to understand. Slowly they dispersed, leaving only those with the most urgent needs. Inside, Nenamdi found Amaka curled up in a corner, her eyes wide with fear. "Papa," she whispered, "I'm scared. What if I can't help everyone? What if I let people down?" Nenamdi knelt beside her, pulling her into a tight hug. "Oh, my brave little one," he said softly, "you don't have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. Your gift is wonderful, but you're still a child. We'll figure this out together, okay?" Amaka nodded, burying her face in her father's chest. For a moment, she wasn't the miraculous healer everyone was talking about. She was just a little girl, seeking comfort in her father's arms. As NMD held his daughter, he silently prayed to the ancestors for guidance. They were entering uncharted waters, and he knew they would need all the wisdom they could get to navigate the challenges ahead. Chapter 3: The Burden of a Gift. As the weeks passed, life in Owa Alero settled into a new rhythm centered around Amaka's gift. True to the chief's advice, Amaka only healed 3 people each day, and only those with the most serious ailments. She also had 2 days of rest between each healing day. At first, this system seemed to work well. Amaka was less exhausted, and the village had a fair way of determining who would receive her help. But as news of her abilities spread further, new challenges arose. People began arriving from neighboring villages, sometimes traveling for days in the hope of being healed. They would camp at the outskirts of Owa Alero, waiting for their chance. This influx of strangers brought both opportunities and problems for the small village. On one hand, the visitors brought trade. They needed food and supplies while they waited, which benefited the local market. Some even brought gifts for Amaka and her family, hoping to curry favor. But there were also tensions. The village's resources were stretched thin, and some locals grumbled about outsiders taking up Amaka's limited healing slots. One hot afternoon, about 2 months after Amaka's gift was revealed, a commotion broke out in the village square. Nandi rushed to the scene to find 2 men arguing heatedly, surrounded by a growing crowd. "My daughter has been sick for weeks," one man, clearly not from Owa Alero, was shouting. "We've waited here for 5 days. Why should your son be healed before her just because you're from this village?" The other man, a local farmer named Okafor, stood his ground. "We have rules here," he retorted. "Our people come first. If you don't like it, go find another healer." Nandi stepped between them, hands raised placatingly. "Please, friends, let's not fight. We're all here because we care for our loved ones." But the tension was palpable. More voices joined the argument, some supporting the village's policy, others sympathizing with the desperate outsiders. Nandi realized with a sinking heart that this was a powder keg waiting to explode. Just then, a small voice cut through the noise. "Stop." The crowd parted, revealing Amaka standing there, her young face etched with distress. A Diaz stood behind her, looking worried. "Please don't fight because of me," Amaka pleaded, her voice trembling. I want to help everyone, but I can't." The crowd fell silent, chastened by the child's words. Nandi moved to his daughter's side, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "You see what you're arguing," does he address the crowd. "Amaka's gift is a blessing, but she's still a child. Our child, we're doing our best to help as many as we can, but we must also protect her." The outsider who had been arguing looked ashamed. I'm sorry," he said softly. "It's just my little girl." Amaka stepped forward, looking up at the man. "What's wrong with your daughter?" she asked. The man knelt down to Amaka's level. "She has a fever that won't break. She's been sick for so long." Amaka looked at her father, then back at the man. "I can try to help her," she said, "even though it's not my healing day." Namdi started to protest, but Adiaz placed a hand on his arm. "Let her," she whispered. "This might be what we need to calm things down." With the crowd watching in hushed anticipation, the man led Amaka to where his daughter lay on a makeshift pallet at the edge of the village. The girl was pale and thin, her breathing labored. Amaka knelt beside her, placing a small hand on the girl's forehead. The now familiar glow appeared, spreading from Amaka's palm. For several tense moments, nothing seemed to happen. Then, slowly, color began to return to the sick girl's cheeks. Her breathing eased, and her eyes fluttered open. A collective gasp went up from the onlookers. The girl's father fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you," he sobbed. Thank you." As Nnamdi helped an exhausted Amaka to her feet, he saw Chief Obiora watching from the edge of the crowd. The old man's face was thoughtful, his eyes never leaving Amaka. Later that evening, as Amaka slept off her exertion, the chief called a meeting of the village elders, including Nnamdi and Adiaz. What happened today cannot be ignored, Obiora began gravely. We've been blessed with a great gift, but it's clear that our current approach is not sustainable. We need to think bigger. The elders murmured in agreement. Nkechi, the female elder, spoke up. Perhaps we need to establish a proper healing center, a place where Amaka can work safely and where we can better manage those seeking her help. Amaka nodded. And we need to train others to assist her. Healers who can handle minor ailments, leaving Amaka free to focus on the most serious cases. As the discussion continued long into the night, Nnamdi found his mind wandering to his daughter, sleeping peacefully at home. He knew that whatever they decided here would shape not just the village's future, but Amaka's as well. The gift that had seemed like such a blessing was proving to be a complex challenge. But as he looked around at the determined faces of his fellow villagers, Nnamdi felt a glimmer of hope. Together they would find a way to nurture Amaka's gift while protecting her childhood. As the meeting drew to a close, Chief Obiora turned to Nnamdi and Idadiis. Your daughter's gift has brought great change to our village, he said solemnly. The path ahead will not be easy, but know that you do not walk it alone. Amaka is a child of this village, and we will all share in the responsibility of guiding her. Nnamdi nodded, feeling both the weight of that responsibility and the comfort of his community's support. As he and Idadias walked home under the star-filled sky, he wondered what new challenges and opportunities the coming days would bring. The following weeks brought significant changes to Owo Alero. Under Chief Obiora's guidance, the village began transforming an old communal building into a dedicated healing center. The structure, once used for storing grain, was cleaned, repaired, and outfitted with simple beds and basic medical supplies. Nkechi, the female elder with knowledge of traditional medicine, took charge of organizing a group of volunteers to assist Amaka. These helpers, mostly young women from the village, were trained in basic healing techniques and the use of herbal remedies. Their role was to triage patients treating minor ailments themselves and identifying those who truly needed Amaka's special gift. As for Amaka herself, she was both excited and nervous about these changes. The new system meant she could help more people without exhausting herself, but it also meant her life was becoming increasingly structured around her gift. One sunny morning, about a month after the healing center opened, Amaka stood at its entrance with her parents, watching as people lined up outside. Some were familiar faces from the village, others were clearly travelers from afar. Remember, Idadias said gently, kneeling beside her daughter, you don't have to heal everyone yourself. Trust Nkechi and the others to help, and if you feel tired, you tell us right away, okay? Amaka nodded, squeezing her mother's hand. I will, Mama. As they entered the building, Nkechi greeted them with a warm smile. Are you ready, little healer? She asked Amaka. Before Amaka could answer, a commotion outside caught their attention. A man burst through the door, carrying a limp child in his arms. Please, he cried out, his eyes wild with fear. My son, he was bitten by a snake. Nkechi immediately took charge, directing the man to lay his son on one of the beds. She examined the child quickly, her experienced hands moving with practiced efficiency. It's a bad bite, she said grimly. Amaka, we need you.